Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So today I wanted to create a little piece to try out a new technique that I tried out in another piece just a little bit briefly, so I wanted to do another one where I could focus on that. So the thing that I wanted to try incorporating is using hatching in my watercolors. So if you don't know what hatching is, basically it's where there's parallel lines next to each other over and over again, just a bunch of hashes. And that can create either shadow or it can show definition in the shape of a form. So if you have a cylinder, it can curve around it and show as it recedes into the distance. So it's actually really useful and it looks really cool. I've always loved the look of it. And I used to incorporate it when I did more pencil drawings and sketches in about high school time. So it was fun to refocus on that. I actually don't get to it towards the end of this piece because I wanted to get the flats of this painting down first, and then I wanted to use the hatching as more of a way to enhance the shadows. That's where I was going to keep them located at. I had the plans of having them in the shadows as well as where I wanted there to be a little bit more blush and rosiness. So I wanted it to be the red areas and the shadows. And I chose to do this piece lineless from the beginning rather than using micron pens and have it very clearly defined. I've been feeling like I'd like to go down this path a little bit and explore it. And for this one, I thought it would be a good opportunity to let the lines be mostly in this hatching effect as well as more defining lines that I can add later on. But at the beginning, you can see where I actually inked in his eyes and then everything else was in a very pale blue pencil. And the reason that I did that is I've tried this technique before where I didn't have any lines to begin with. And the time before this, I really loved it. But one of the things was that I wanted to make sure that I kept definition within the eyes. And that was something that got a little bit out of hand in the past. So I did ink that in, and I knew that I wanted the contrast to be the strongest there since there's eyelashes there and shadows. I definitely wanted the eyes to stand out. I didn't want there to be low contrast there. So I opted to go straight with the inking pen for his eyes, and then anything else where there's line work, that is all done in watercolors, which was really nice. It was a nice breath of fresh air where I could focus on being a little bit more adaptive with it. But for this one, I let the shadow shapes get a little bit muddier than I would have preferred. They weren't really as smooth and well blended as I would have liked, but in the fact that they were a little bit blotchier, the fact that I was doing hatching on top of it kind of helped camouflage that a little bit. It was a little bit convenient that the time that I felt a little bit less pleased with the look of the shadows on their own, I had a technique up my sleeve that I hoped would help make it not quite as obvious or apparent. And it actually is really nice to have a few techniques like this or others that you know can solve certain problems. I have a lot of them like that where I know if I make a certain type of mistake, I can use a different technique that will help cover it up. And it's something that I'm really happy with, and it usually ends up working pretty well. And I think that using hatching like this is going to be a great way to cover up, say, where I've accidentally smeared a certain color onto another. That happens a lot where I accidentally rest my hand on something and put a little blotch somewhere else where it shouldn't be. Well, first off, I try to lift it up if it's a mistake like that. But if it's there and there's not going to be any way to take it off, going in with hatching like this really makes it hard to spot. There's a few places in this piece in particular that I did actually focus on that. And it really does help, because if I go over with just a straight up wash, again, it's just always going to be darker. It's going to have one more layer of paint on there, so it's always going to stand out. But if I have this, I can make it so it's not nearly as standing out when it's sitting there all on its own. But I think I could have actually been a little bit more obvious with this technique. I think I was a little bit more timid with the hatching that I was doing. So I actually didn't vary it that much from the color or the value of the original shadow. And I also did it very thin and close together. So when you're looking at it up close, it creates a really nice texture. But when you're looking at it farther away, and by farther away, I mean like 2 feet away, it starts to get a little bit harder to spot, which is definitely okay, but where it was something that I was trying out a new technique and I wanted to see what the bounds were for it, I should have pushed it more so I could see, okay, this works and this doesn't, and this is where I can kind of rein it in a little bit, but that's all a learning curve, I think, for trying out new techniques. So the next time I try it out, I think I'll try maybe a mix of whether they're darker hatching or thicker or more spaced out, and just get a feel of how they affect the look of the piece more and differently. And after I thought I was done with this piece, I ended up going back and tweaking a few things. One of the things is that I actually made the iris of his eyes darker. I really like the look of it being really close together in value and color as the whites of his eyes, which are actually red, but it just got a little bit too lost, and it affected his expression in a way that I really didn't anticipate. So I darkened his iris, and that just helped give it a little bit more contrast and clarity as far as what's going on with his eyes. I also tweaked a little bit with his mouth shape. I tried to get it a little bit closer to the sketch that I had, which I do like the way that it's shaped a little bit better, but I'm trying to get better at translating the more expressive looks in my sketches over to my final. And that is it for today. I will have this little mini painting available at my shop. There's a link down in the description that'll take you over there. And yeah, I will be back on Saturday with another piece. I do have a link to my Patreon down in the description, as well as all of the tools that I used to create this painting. So if you're curious, you can check those listings out. But that's about it for today. So I will be back on Saturday. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you then.